Welcome to Rockhampton with Nyree Johnson, the podcast that celebrates the people, places, and stories that make Rocky and the wider Central Queensland community extraordinary. I firmly believe we're sitting on a golden goose in this region, and I love meeting the people who are doing the quiet work behind the scenes to keep the community thriving. They run our sports clubs, they organise our charities, they support the people who are lost in the system, and they volunteer their time so generously. And I feel like the luckiest person in the world when someone shares their story with me privately. And now I'm privileged to bring their stories and achievements to you, the listeners of Rockhampton with Nyree Johnson. Sometimes they wonder why they were asked, thinking that what they're doing and what they've done is not that big of a deal. And I can hand on heart tell you that it absolutely is. Other times my guests are ecstatic to be asked, and they look forward to sharing a piece of their Rocky and Central Queensland story. Thank you for listening in. I truly appreciate you being here. Today's guest is Trudy Graham, and I am super excited to have Trudy on the show because she is one of the inspirational people who I look at and go, holy heck, you're doing some good stuff. Now, for those who don't know, Trudy, she is a fellow volunteer. She's the president of the Zonta Club of Rockhampton. But the thing that makes her super inspirational is her career change and her pivot and focus in the work that she's currently doing today. So Trudy's a school teacher, former principal support person around the region, and now is a leadership coach. She's a bit of an AI expert, if you ask me, especially when it comes to schools and educators. And I am really excited to have you on the show, Trudy, so that we can dive into all of these things, your story, your employment to date, and of course, where you've pivoted to today. So thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, Nori. And the feeling is mutual. I love watching you and the work you do and all the facets of it. So excited to share this time with you.
Yes, thank you so much. It is selfishly a privilege for me to host this podcast. And as we were talking before I hit record, you get off the hook as the host. You're the person asking the questions, and so that's me. I just get to ask you all of these questions. But before we really get into the fun ones, I want to know, if you could be an expert at anything at all in the world, what would it be? And
Well, I would love to be an expert in AI in education.
I think you're already there, though.
So we're all learning, right?
Mm.
Yeah, but I think what I would actually love is a crystal ball so I could see into the future, although that could be a little scary. But I also think, too, we've all got an opportunity to help shape what that's going to look like and to be able to see into the future and how it all plays out would be amazing. But yeah, I think I'm just expert in the sense of a couple of steps ahead of others that I work with and support, because it's all such a new field and so quickly developing. And I've even run sessions, and I say this at the front end of the sessions that I run, this is a fast moving space and topic, and it's so competitive out there with the big companies that what I'm telling you today is as good as I know today, and everything could change tomorrow. And mid session, I'll go and point someone to something and go, oops, that's all changed. That's, an update. So let's find out where that is now. So yeah, it's a crazy old time, but it's amazing to witness it. And I would love to see down the track how it's all what it's going to be like.
Yes, I am super excited about AI and equally nervous. And I don't mean nervous as in scared, but I love AI and understanding what it can do to help us, what tools it can deliver, not to replace people at all, which I 100% know you would be on the same page as me, but to make things more streamlined, to deal with the red tape that sometimes we have to navigate, and, to free us up as people to do the stuff that matters, to do the stuff that we're skilled at doing. This podcast alone is an example of that. I'm not the best editor in the world. If some of these tools that I use to record this podcast didn't exist, we'd probably have an episode a year, let alone one a week. So I love that. I wondered if that was going to be your answer, and I could imagine it would be so fun. I don't know, funny in the middle of a session to go, oh, that changed 15 minutes ago. Like,
That's what it feels like with AI. It changes so quickly.
Yeah, well, we're coming off the Christmas holiday break, right? So I've spent yesterday and today going back through my slide decks and going back in and playing with the AI tools because that was so 2 months ago when
Yes.
the end of last year.
Yep.
It was, yeah, end of
Mm.
November, December. And what happened with AI even over the Christmas break, like, AI could give you your previous year in a wrap up and
Mhm.
give you all of these amazing insights and help you plan for the year ahead. And then it did the whole image tools that came,
Yes.
preset. Yeah, so all of that. And there are a few other little minor things that weren't so obvious, but very useful.
Mm.
So yeah, I'm like, righto, what's happened since I was last really in this space and making sure that
Yes.
but again, when you are honest and just tell it as it is and say, hey, look, I'm learning as much as anyone, and this could be different as we go. People are okay with that. And yeah, that's a part of my philosophy too, Nari, is that we're all in this together and we learn from each other. And in fact, there is no guidebook. Like there's no little Microsoft Office paperclip in the bottom of the screen saying, do this, press here. It's the software that has no help, right? There's no help guide. There's no button to go and get help. So, yeah.
And there's a lot of like you've got to really have your brain switched on as well to use it, because there's a lot of people out there scamming, creating AI software that actually isn't anything. And you've got to be really cautious. So it's such an uncertain time, but an exciting one. And as I said, like nervous, but excited. Like I feel so lucky to be working well, not only the digital age, but in this AI age. And I can only imagine what it was like. I wasn't around, but I was around, sorry, but when the internet first became a thing, but I was too little to understand the impact to what that did to the workforce. And yeah, so it's just like, I get my turn now. It's AI. Yes.
Absolutely. And it will have impacts in the
Mm.
way we do so many things in our life, just like the internet did in the late
Mm-hmm.
90s and early 2000s. I was old
Mm.
enough for that and I watched that.
Even like what social media did to the way that we engage with each other. And yes, these things do have their flaws. Of course, there's way too much time being spent on social media, but they've also got some incredible benefits of connectedness across the world. We can learn things we've never been able to learn before. That bookcase of encyclopedias, or that set that I used to have in the 90s on my mum's bookshelf of encyclopedias, like they would have been out of date. Printed them yesterday, they would have been out of date an hour later.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd love to do the comparison around what was in that set of encyclopedias and what sits on Wikipedia alone.
Mm,
And it's
mm.
funny you talking about that too, Nori, because your questions had me thinking about my own experience. And I go back to, well, it was early high school, late primary school, early high school. And my parents ran a business in a small town. And I remember having to dial up the exchange on the phone and ask for a line to make a phone call.
Wow.
And I was, just pre-high school, so 11 or 12, and we
Yes.
still had the old exchange.
Yes.
And then, and now, and I remember as a kid dreaming about it's kind of like the Jetsons, right? And dreaming about being able to see someone on the end of a phone call. Well, here we are.
Mm-hmm.
FaceTime is so last decade. God, it feels like it anyway.
Yes.
And now we're talking about AI, and it'll be amazing to see what comes. And one of the updates I did notice is there's already shopping built in as a prompt option in ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that yesterday. I went, oh yeah, here we go. So
Yeah.
surprised that there's going to be
Mm.
that economic and transaction aspect of it. Yeah.
And even the way we find businesses, like I know as a small business owner myself, and you are as well yourself, we go to Google, and there's nothing wrong with Google. And, there's a whole world of Google ad marketing. And now we've got AI. And I know I've gone to AI a couple of times just to test it and go, tell me what services, let's say that, tell me what electrician services are available in Central Queensland. And it gives me a list. It's not always right, as we know. It's still learning itself, but it's interesting because the next wave for small businesses will be, how do I get found on Google? on AI, just like I get found on Google, and that alone is a minefield. So how do we get found on AI as well?
Absolutely. And businesses already are pivoting, and there will be a whole industry to help small business be found through AI prompts. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, even by the time this podcast goes to production and is published, it might exist like because it'll be a couple of weeks between recording and publishing. So, so much is going to change between recording and publishing, but that's the exciting thing for us both, I think.
Yeah.
But tell us a little bit about your story. Who is Trudy? What are those key moments in your life that have led you on this path? I mean, it's such a big shift, and as I said in my intro, it's really inspirational when I sit back and I look at people who are following the path that they feel compelled to follow. They're not doing what, they should be doing, or traditionally you go into work as a teacher and you're a teacher or a principal or a support school staff member for the rest of your career. And that's not your story. So tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, well, Nyree, my dad was a teacher, and like so many people, aunts were teachers, both sides of my family. It was something that I decided in high school that I wanted to do. So yes, went to teachers college because I'm that old, and yeah, trained as a primary teacher. And to keep the story short, I served in all of my service has been with state schools, and all of them have been in rural and regional areas and even remote. So, but I was only a teacher for not even 4 years, and I'd made mention that I would love to be in a small school because where I grew up, and I grew up in Eamon-Dubras, small country town, there were lots of small schools in the local area, and I actually went to high school with some other students who'd actually gone to small schools through their primary years. And that whole small school environment interested me as a teacher, and I made comment about it. Anyway, the person who I'd been talking to said that there were some small schools advertised at the time. So I went looking, and what they were actually pointing me to was a principal role, not a teacher role. And I went, whoa, I hadn't thought about that. Anyway, as it turned out, again, let's keep it short, but I ended up becoming a teaching principal, and my first principal position was up in the Gulf in Burketown. So
Wow.
that was back in the early 90s. And following that was principal of 5 schools. So Burketown, Richmond in North Queensland, and then came to Rockhampton in 2000, and it was a really deliberate decision. My husband and I, we wanted to be closer to our sets of our parents, and because at that time I'd had my first son, he was 2 years old, and we wanted him to be closer to family. And by closer, we basically drew a 4-hour radius around where our folks were living and thought, well, that's an easy drive on a Friday afternoon after work to go and see them for the weekend. So I got a promotion, and I was a principal at Warraburra in Gracemere, did 4 years there, then over to Allenstown. I did 7 years at Allenstown, and then Mount Archer. So I look at it as the privilege of leading 3 amazing state schools in this local area and being a part of those communities. And very similar schools sort of in size, as it turns out, but very different, and only about 20k apart. Each of them is so unique in their own ways in terms of the community and the people and the staff. So I could do a whole podcast on that too, but we won't. So,
Well, you will do a whole podcast on that when you release your own.
so I then in 2015, with encouragement and lots of my moves and promotions and through my career have been because someone, said you should do this, suggested that I consider being in a regional role. And yeah, that's what I ended up doing. The title was assistant regional director, but that doesn't tell you anything. The days were spent visiting schools across Central Queensland, north, south, west, and I even did some schools on the coast across over an 8-year period, and working with school leadership teams. And yeah, as you mentioned, a pivot. So that was a 34-year career with state schools, one that I'm very proud of and I loved. It had its ups and downs, but as my husband points out, I love a challenge. It's it's a very rewarding career.
Mm.
Yeah, so 2023, mid 23, with a restructure and the outcome of the recruitment process, what the department thought I might do for the next 15 years of my career and what I thought I could do and should do were very different. And it was a really clear moment for me to make a big decision, but it was actually an easy decision in the end, Nyree, once I sort of got some clarity on, financial situation and all of those kind of components. I just knew that I could have a bigger impact if I left
Yes.
and then started what I called career number two.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's probably when you and I connected. So
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
so that was
No, I remember I remember meeting you and you telling me about career number two, and not that I'd not been exposed to it before, but I'd never met anyone as and this is a good thing, but like as bold, ambitious, confident, this is what I'm going to do. Like you knew exactly what you were doing, why you were doing it, who you were going to serve, how you were going to do it. And I thought, whoa, if I could be half the woman that you are at that stage of your career, then that would be a bloody good thing.
thank you. Well, that's amazing that it looked like that to you because it didn't feel like that to me at times.
It never does it?
No, no. And yeah, I was 55 when I resigned and I still saw it that I had at least another 15 years and possibly more, depending on
Mm,
what the physicality of the work looks like. But I did see it as an opportunity, as a big open book, and I could chart and do whatever I wanted to do. And I had to make
mm.
a joke. I actually had to decide what I was going to do now that I'd left school. So, so yes,
Oh,
so
that's funny.
what's that going to look like? And there's a couple of key things that I knew to be true. And one was the rural and regional focus,
Mm,
leadership, because it's what I've done for so long,
mm,
um,
mhm,
and education. There was also a question about the tech
mhm,
and having a bit of a technology flavour in there because I had played with the AI before I'd left the department and had run some professional development for leaders, system and school leaders
mm,
at that time. But I also knew it would be a crazy space to play in. And I thought I didn't want to be known as the AI girl. But it's gone full circle because as I've worked with leaders, both in education and across other organisations, so I've even done some work now for leaders in not-for-profits.
mm,
What brings me back there is I can see really clearly, and it fills my bucket when I see that how I can help them
mm,
in leveraging AI to deal with the workload,
mhm,
be able to achieve what they need to do with their role in more efficient and effective and impactful ways so that they can
mm,
get stuff done and then really pay attention to where they can have the biggest impact, which is usually with people, right? So,
mm,
yeah, so that's why I just keep leaning into it because I love how that can have such a positive influence and impact on people in what they're doing in their roles.
mm. It is a game changer. It does really let you let go of the things that are time consuming. They're not unnecessary, but it can sometimes be that governance and compliance stuff, and the T's need to be crossed and the I's need to be dotted, and it's a lot sometimes. Of course, you can't let go of it, but you can figure out that way that AI allows you to work optimally and efficiently while still ticking those boxes, but actually delivering the job you're doing, like the job that you're supposed to be doing. Yeah.
Yeah. I talk with school leaders around game changing is cliche. For them, it's life changing in that they
Mhm.
get their life back. So
Mhm.
I'm sure most people would be very aware of the workload and the burnout in the
Mm.
teaching workforce and in leadership. And like many professions, the difficulty in attracting people to the role with the workload.
Mm. Mm.
So this enables school leaders and teachers to
Mm.
reclaim their evenings, their nights,
Mhm.
and their weekends and
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
get things done like planning a unit of work that, their lesson plans done in no time at all.
Mm.
Something that might take 10 hours can now, once they're skilled, they can, generate in 30 minutes. So, yeah.
And it's not that they're generating from nothing as well. Like that's when you really truly understand AI and how it works, which of course you and I both don't fully understand it because it's still evolving every day. We're just doing our best. But when you understand what it can deliver, it's not that we're replacing people, it's that we're enabling them. And a teacher would, and I'm presuming this, so correct me if I'm wrong, but a teacher would go into a year and like they've got lesson plans embedded in their brains because they've just done it for so long. But it's that that admin requirement to document everything and cross every T, as I said, and dot every I. And that's the time consuming bit. It's just trying to get that lesson plan out of the brain and onto paper to meet a compliance need sometimes, and it's to articulate exactly what it is that is in your head, but you put it on paper so it's there for different reasons. So yeah, 10 hours down to 30, I can imagine is a massive, massive time saver.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I teach too, Nari, that there's a human in the driver's seat.
Yes.
AI isn't replacing humans at this point. And people need to bring their expertise and their experience to the AI. And with that, the better you can prompt, and then the better you can critique its responses, because if you've played with it at all, it can give you absolute rubbish.
Yeah.
And when you bring your professional knowledge and experience to the AI, and your work processes and your workflow and what needs to be considered and factored in, and then you can get better responses when you prompt effectively, but also then you can analyze its results. And so absolutely human at this point is needed. And yeah, of course, I'm sitting here thinking about lesson planning or, planning for school strategic plans, generating reports, board reports, correspondence. I'm thinking about the work I've done with health. I'm about to do some work with the Smith family, St. Vincent de Paul. Like, they've all got their uniqueness in their fields, and they bring that and then interact with the AI and, like I just said, prompt, more effective prompting and being able to critique its response and push back too. Of course, you give it feedback.
Yes. Yes. I have often said to a couple of different AI models, this is not good. This is rubbish. Like, where are you pulling this from? It's a little bit funny, but it's a good example for those unfamiliar with AI would be, I'm not a school teacher at all. I mean, my exposure with young people is through scouting, and we don't do lesson plans. It'd be like if I went to AI and said, create me a lesson plan for, I want to teach year 3 maths, a particular topic. And then I just get that lesson plan and run with it. I'm not a teacher, so I can't critique that. I don't know whether that's good or bad. I don't know whether what it's given me is enough. I don't know. Whereas you as a teacher, you can say the same thing or get the same result out of AI, and then you can look at it and go, well, no, that's not going to work because I have 34 years experience in a classroom and I know that's not going to work. Whereas I don't have that. So that's what we need to remember, I guess, about how to use this. It's, at the moment is not replacing people. We need people with their experience and expertise. Yeah. But you mentioned a lot about, of course, that regional and community impact, and being in Rocky in particular and being here for such a long time now. You're a local now, I guess. What does that mean to you, though? Like, the work that you've done, the volunteering that you do, and the work that you're doing outside of education, being in a regional Queensland, what does that mean to you? Why is that important to you?
I guess, Nari, it probably comes from my childhood. When I look at my mum and dad, mum was a dressmaker, dad was a teacher, and then they ended up in running small businesses in Mandubra. And mum was, I remember her, when I was in primary school and high school, going off during the week at night for meetings for JSETs or hospital auxiliary. She was always heavily involved in those two community organisations. Dad was a councillor with the Shire Council back when they were Shire councils, and he was also a Rotarian for many years. So they're my role models. And I guess too, when I was a principal, you have a role as a part of the community as a leader within the community wherever you are, even if it's the school community in a bigger city like Rockhampton. And that keeps you connected to organisations and what's happening in the community and families and as I said, those 3 schools I talked about, and they're all unique in their own ways and have different needs and cultures. But I guess now, and since I left, and have pivoted and creating my new career, I saw that too as an opportunity to get out and be in different networks. And I was amazed at what was out there that I just had no idea about, that I probably should have known about,
I
thinking,
remember you saying that.
really,
Yeah.
right. It was so exciting to discover these groups of people coming together with business interests and the clubs. So as you mentioned, the Zonta Club. Now, I'd been a member of Zonta many, many years ago, but my sons were little and I couldn't sustain it with being a mum of young boys and my role at the time with my work commitment. So I just found when I was creating career number 2 and had some, greater options, and I wanted to stay connected with people because I now work from home. And yet I'd been used to a work environment every day where I was surrounded by people, right? So that was really important to me to build new and different relationships. And so getting out and connecting with different networks and community groups helped me stay connected to people. It gets me out of the house. And that's, in one way, it's a little bit selfish. The other way too, I feel that it's about doing whatever you can to make a difference and bring whatever your skill set is and whatever your interests are. There's something out there. You just have to find the little part that you can play. And within your limitations as well, right? So, yes, I'm president of Zonta right now, and sometimes I feel like I wish I could do more. And the irony is I could have done more probably when I was an employee, because I knew financially that was systematized and each week I got a salary. Whereas now I'm like, hey, if I'm not actively working at building my business, I don't have an income. So at times I think, oh, there's this push-pull, but I just feel that the reward in being involved, outweighs what you give. I get back more than what I give is what I'm trying to say, Nyree.
Yes.
And I guess too, the other interesting thing, as well as being surprised around some of the networks that are out there, it's the things that I have learned that I should have known about. And I'll give you an example. Zonta, of course, is around building a better world for women and girls. And one of our really key campaigns is around Zonta Says No to Violence against women-based violence. And we hold the breakfast in October, for the start of our 16 days of activism. And I go to that breakfast each year, and it opens my eyes even further to the prevalence of domestic violence in our local community. And I thought, as a school principal, that I was well informed and understood that. And in actual fact, as I reflect now, I didn't understand the full, and I still don't, understand the full impact and occurrence of that in our local community. So for me, and I love learning, one of my core strengths, and no surprise, being in education as well, but being involved in Zonta has actually opened my eyes to some of those really key community issues. And being able to be involved with an amazing group of women as well.
I know.
We've got the best club.
They are so good.
Yeah, it's there's, like I said, the rewards for me are outweigh what I try to give. Yeah.
Yeah, and you make a good point, like regarding we just don't know what we don't know. Reflecting on 34 years in education, and that is such a pivotal role to be connected to the community and the families in that community. So you're right to think or consider yourself to be fairly well informed with the challenges faced by the community, but that the work that does happen around this town that is in secret, not because it shouldn't be broadcast, but because we're protecting vulnerable people or people at times of their life that are extremely vulnerable, and there's just so much of it that goes on. And when you're in a club like the Zonta Club of Rockhampton, and sometimes you sit there and you're having, obviously off track slightly here, but you're having a meeting and you're talking about the things that we're going to contribute to, the things that we're going to do to help the community. And then you just take stock for a second and you go, hang on a sec. Am I really sitting in a meeting talking about sexual assault in the Rockhampton region and how the Zonta Club of Rockhampton helps to close the gap between what service providers and what health providers, and what that little gap there.
Yeah.
And then you think, wow, I'm involved. Well, not me personally, sorry, but like we are involved in some pretty incredibly important initiatives because we care about the community.
Yeah, spot on. And the other one is homelessness, Nyree. The statistics on that just blew me away. And again, that came from a presentation at one of our Zonta events. And I can tell you that I was aware that there were, and we think homelessness happens to a certain group of people with a certain
Correct.
economic, socioeconomic background and all of those kind of preconceived biases that we can hold. I became aware that there are teachers that were couch surfing because they were unable to get accommodation in our local area. So, it's through raising awareness and shifting some of those preconceived ideas and biases and assumptions that we have, and actually start digging and looking for the facts and the occurrences and what is going on in our local community. And once you become aware of that too, it's a bit hard to ignore it, right? So then you go, right,
Yeah, you can't.
how
Yep.
can we make a difference? Homelessness is a huge issue, but there are still things that, we can be involved with or try and advocate for to make it better. And the other part too, I was thinking about this in preparing for this chat today, even making a difference for one person,
Yes.
it's worth it.
Absolutely. That is one of my favorite mottos. I have a few, but one of the things I like to remind myself and other people about often is that, to the world, to the whole big wide world, we are just one person here for a short period of time. But to one person, we might individually make the world of difference. And that matters. And that's important. And that's worth doing. That's worth sitting at those meetings in the evenings, or going and volunteering some time, or putting some money in to purchase some things that need to be supplied. And that's worth it. Yeah. Yeah. It's really important to be connected to community. And I think the more and more people that open their eyes to that, they will realize the benefits far outweigh the time commitment or the financial commitment that they put into the community. So tell me though, if we pivot slightly to, in your career of teaching and being a principal and being a regional director to what you're doing now, there's got to have been some incredibly challenging moments, but also some significant highlights. Is there anything that really stands out for you on either end of the scale that was, pivotal, life-changing moment, might have changed your perspective or the way that you approached things? Of course, you've mentioned the restructure that didn't align, but, was that it, or was there something else that comes to mind?
Yeah, that is an obvious one and the most recent one. I guess the other one too, Nori, is I actually lost a younger sister at a very young age. Jodie was younger sister, and she died in 2003 from cancer. She didn't get to celebrate her 25th birthday. And she also was a teacher. She was working out west at the time, and when she was diagnosed with cancer. So yeah, losing her, there are four girls in my family, and I'm the eldest sister. Losing her at that time, again, was probably, it had a huge impact on me and, of course, our family and her broader circle of friends. And I guess it probably made me, sounds crazy, made me a better human, more understanding when people,
I understand that.
as a leader, when staff would come and tell you that things were going on for them in their personal life, I had a lot more empathy than I had prior because of that experience. So yeah, I think it just kind of, helped me see things in a whole different perspective. The other thing too, as a result of that, was when talking about community, I got involved with it. There was a team of us, my sisters, my mum, and other friends in Rockhampton. We were involved for a number of years. Then, Relay for Life in Hervey. So, there's those turning really tough and difficult circumstances and trying to, put a positive spin on it and make a difference. And the years that followed, 3 consecutive years, as a result of that, collectively, team, Where's Wally relay team, we raised,
Oh, you were that team.
we raised over $50,000.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so it was. And good times too in doing that collectively together.
Yeah.
And again, looking at how you can make a difference and coming together. There's probably a theme there too in that being with others and connecting with others and together as a group, the difference you can make, positive impact.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
It's not like you ever want to put a positive spin on losing someone, because that's never ever anything that you could really bear to think of. But to have all of you come together as a team for the 3 years following your sister passing away, like that's special memories for you all as you continue to live your lives because your sister didn't have that opportunity.
absolutely.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And I guess it was that it gave us a collective purpose and drive
Mm.
to do something where we could
Yes.
have an
We
impact.
can't control what happens to us or around us, but we can control how we respond to it.
Yeah.
Another one of my favorite sayings.
Yeah. That's it.
And you sounds like you all absolutely took control and went, "You know what? We're gonna do something with this."
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you think about everything that's motivating you and driving you forward today, being a small business owner, I can absolutely relate. It's not a fun gig all the time. It can be challenging, it can be hard, especially in those startup days. But whether it be around your business or that career change or your community work, but what's the thing that keeps you moving forward every day? And second part of that question is, what advice would you give to anyone coming along after you who's still figuring out the world? And of course, we're both still figuring out the world because none of us have it right at any point in our lives. None of us know everything and we've nailed it. But, what's driving you and what advice would you give?
Yeah. I think the drive is I love a challenge. And I just, and this is just my new challenge, figuring things out and working out how I can take what I know and the experiences I have had and be of value to others. And I guess that's kind of where my work has landed, in that I can use my experience across all of those years and pay it forward. It's like paying it forward, Nyree, to other leaders out there, and particularly women who are navigating it. And it's not easy. And I can draw on the experiences and support them and guide the way. And for young people coming through, and this might sound really ironic coming from someone who's had a career in education for 34 years and still working in the space from outside. I want to say to young people that success at school doesn't automatically equate to success in life, because there are a lot of people who do school well and then after they finish struggle, believe it or not. I've seen that happen. And the flip side too, failure at school doesn't mean failure in life, because there's a whole swag of people, loads of examples that technically failed school, dropped out, and are brilliant successes. And depending on whatever you want to measure, you'll find examples.
Yes.
Whether it's, what they do in terms of serving the community, social impact, running businesses, whatever. But yeah, I think that we can't, young people, and there's so much pressure on young people too, right, around schools when they're leaving and ATARs and all of that sort of stuff. And I just want to say, it's more than that. And don't be. And yeah, so that's kind of, again, a little bit of irony coming from a school teacher. But when you look at the big picture, that's
Yes.
kind of how it is.
I'll be your poster girl for that point.
Well, And I didn't say this at the start, but that's my story too, right? I decided I wanted to be a teacher and I didn't get into any universities or colleges as they were back then in Queensland.
Mm.
So that's how I
Wow.
come to be studying in New South Wales. And I wouldn't
Yeah.
trade that experience now for the world. Like it was
Mhm.
amazing. But
Mm.
yeah, there's lots of people whose stories are, whatever happened in school,
Mm.
but what they end up doing in life and the two, yeah, I think we put undue pressure
Yeah.
and have stories around what school means. And yeah, it doesn't have to be the way. You can write your own story post school.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's really important for parents to remember as well, because sometimes, like, I can't imagine many school leavers are going to listen to this podcast. But parents hopefully will. That's sometimes the default thinking that we get into. I've got to help them, do well, but it's okay. We don't have to.
Yeah.
It's hard as a parent, as you would know as well, to move away from what's considered appropriate as they're in those final years of school.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's fantastic advice. I'm curious if you can tell us just a little bit about the services that your business does offer, in case there are people out there who are not educators, who might not be working with a not-for-profit, but if they wanted access to someone who could come in and teach them leadership, AI, tech, all of the above, is that something that you do as well?
Yes. Nari, it's usually with teams of
Mm-hmm.
staff teams.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the way that I do the training is that you could have someone who's got a marketing role, someone who's got an admin role, someone who's in finance, the CEO, the manager. They can all be in the same room and do the same training. And,
Mm.
and it's all practical and hands-on
Mm-hmm.
and learn some of the tools and features as well as prompting techniques to get the best out of AI and actually apply it in their role.
Mm.
And I've got packages for training, so they can certainly reach out to me and we can have a conversation around how
Mm.
that might work best for them, because having a little break in between the sessions too can help people, right? A little bit of time to play. I joke about, it's not a joke actually, adults can learn through play as well, and we don't play enough as adults. So giving people time to play in between the workshops so that they can explore AI and then come back and consolidate that. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. I think there would be a massive range of small, medium, large businesses around the Rocky and Central Queensland area that could absolutely use that help. So, yeah, thank you so much. And really good to know as well the difference. Like, some people do go searching for that one-on-one support, but when you're a specialist in team-based training and bringing all of those roles together, that's fantastic to highlight as well, because that's actually quite unique in itself to offer that sort of a service. So yeah, thank you so much. But it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast, Trudy. I'm so glad we got to do this. I know it's been a long time coming. I've been very keen to have you on. So thank you for giving up your time and joining me today.
Thanks, Nori. It's been a blast.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode of Rockhampton with Nyree Johnson, proudly brought to you by Marketing Unagency Co., the marketing team who do things very differently and who are determined to make the world of marketing less chaotic and far clearer for small businesses and community groups.